is going on, YouTube world? So we've got one really exciting tutorial, the Ben TK key lock transition from his World Cruise Tour creative video. I apologize for the way that I look. Hair's, I just kind of woke up and I wanted to get this one out before I started the week because I'm gonna be really busy. So yeah, we're gonna tackle this sucker and knock this guy out. I got a lot of question marks around how he did this transition. It has to be Element 3D. No, it has to be. No, it's Cinema 4D. There's gotta be something going on. Ben TK just came out recently in one of his stories on Instagram and said that he has never touched Element 3D or Cinema 4D at all for any of his stuff. I struggle with some of that, but in the same token, I can completely understand how he gets around it. After analyzing this over freaking weeks of my time, I came up with one solution, and that's the solution that I'm gonna walk you guys through, at least for this specific transition. We're gonna build this no Element 3D, no Cinema 4D, all internal to After Effects, 100% images, and setting them up in 3D space. So, anyways, guys, without any further ado, I'm not gonna rattle on like I usually do. Let's go ahead and let's hop in and let's make this sucker work, all right? Let's go ahead and kind of take a look at how this file is set up and how I was able to recreate this effect using only a bunch of images. So, that being said, let's go ahead and solo this key lock front. The first thing that I did was I cut out the image. Pretty straightforward, guys, nothing crazy there. And then I masked out the actual keyhole area. Now, this is gonna be really key because what we're gonna do is we're going to zoom in and we wanna make sure that that's masked out so we can go straight through it. Second thing that we're gonna wanna do here after we go ahead and get our image set up is we're going to want to create a camera. 24, 35, whatever you guys think works for you, go ahead and set that camera up, and then the most important thing is to create a cam control because that camera can get really crazy really fast. So that cam control is basically just a null, which we've covered time and time again, is just a null object that's controlling the camera. So basically all my positional elements for the transition are controlled in that null object. So you can see it right there. So all the position, it moves through, and then we're into the other stuff. Now, this is gonna be kind of tricky because I have depth of field on. So I'm gonna go into my camera really quick and I'm gonna turn my depth of field off. And then if we go into our guts area right here, I'm gonna turn all of the teeth off right here so that doesn't get in our way. But you'll see we have basically a bunch of 3D cards kind of set up here. And what those look like, basically, if I click on one of these image assets, like the straight piece right, you're gonna see right here, and if I was to just solo that, you'll see that that's just basically the image flipped in 3D space. Let's go ahead and rotate and look at our settings here. We've got rotation set at 90 degrees on the X and then 87 on the Y. So if I was to go ahead and set all of these back to 0, let's go ahead and say 0, let's go ahead and say 0, and then 0, and then I was to scale back a little bit. Now, the reason that it's doing that is because I have some transparency settings on this guy right here. So I'm gonna go ahead and delete those just for the sake, and then bump this up to 100%. So you basically just have this card. It's just an image on the canvas. And what I did was I created a bunch of those and kind of offset them a little bit in order to recreate all of the guts. All right, cool. So if I go back in here and then I turn on the rest of these layers, you can see basically what I did is I took all of those straight pieces and I just oriented them a funny or a funky different way inside of After Effects. If I kind of scroll out here, you can kind of see what it looks like. There's just a bunch of cards and images set up where the camera can travel through this spot right here. This is what it basically looks like from a bird's eye view. You have a bunch of these cards set up that the camera is basically gonna travel through and end up over here. All right, guys, so basically that's it. You have a bunch of 3D cards set up, very simple to do, on the back side of the key lock. So let's go ahead and pull up the key lock positioning really quick so you can see this. My Z space depth on the position for the key lock front is 0. Now, the first metal strips, and if I go ahead and pull up all of these and I hit P to show you the position, all of the position values are set to kind of line up, and you can kind of see that. Let me close these off. But you can kind of see that they're set up in offsets in Z space and kind of brought back as close to the key lock hole as possible without breaking the plane. And that's basically what you're doing when you're setting up all of this stuff inside of the guts. You're just creating a tunnel, so to speak, for the camera to basically travel through. And that's it. So if I was to play the key lock front, and then if you'll notice when I select all of these and I hit T, I have some transparency settings that basically hide this until I get close enough right here, and then boom, transparency comes on, I'm inside of it, and then I have a little bit of another transition in the back right here, which I thought was kind of cool to add to the effect, kind of like a mechanism unlocking or opening. You see a lot of that inside of Ben TK's on the back side of his, with especially the key lock back. So you'll notice that there's another transparency and those key locks open up. So you kind of have, if we were just to look at this is kind of what we have. Boom. And that's it, right? Like just a bunch of images kind of moving and setting up transparency elements inside. So the camera's kind of close up, it moves, and then we have our big, let me go ahead and hit source. We have our big camera rotation. So if I was to go down to hit R, the camera basically gets to a certain point and then it rotates around, and then it kind of moves through in Z space and opens us up. It sounds simple, but just like any one of Ben TK's transitions, it's extremely tedious. So you're just gonna have to be very, very, very comfortable with just spending time to make this look the way that it needs to. Now, for example, in my case, all of these have, CC toner and curves effects on them to kind of blend the images, because mine were gray metallic, images right here. So I just went ahead and I added a CC toner and then a curves adjustment in order to kind of make it match right here. Now here's the thing, you wouldn't necessarily even have to do that if you had a high res image and you literally use the same exact image inside as the guts. That's the key, that's the trick, that's how he pulled it off and probably saved himself a lot of workflow time. And see, you'll notice right here, you can see some plane issues right here, right? You can see all that stuff kind of happening. Well, here's the thing, if I go back into my camera and I turn back on my depth of field, this was one of the big selling points, and I think that you'll notice inside of Ben TK's version as well, is that he uses this depth of field in order to kind of create this illusion that there's only certain things that need to be in focus to kind of really sell the smoke and mirrors of it all, right? So if you'll notice, my camera options are set to zoom at 1124, depth of field was turned on, and then I set my focus distance up. So here's the thing, my focus distance right here, if I was to turn on two views, a horizontal view, and let's say let's say for the sake of this, let's go for a right look of this. So we and then let's zoom out a little bit. And then let's look at our camera. So if I was to look, my focus distance, which is going to be, and I don't think that you guys can see it, but it's this pink line right here. That's what the camera's focusing in on. So I've basically got that focal distance set right here at my key lock line. So that's the position in Z space that's being focused in on. So once it gets here though, I went ahead and moved my focus distance in really tight to the camera. So it's really close focal distance so that everything out in the background or really close tight into the foreground is getting blown out. And that is one of the key tricks that he uses as he's kind of going through it. And again, you could really sell this effect if you had the right images to use. But that is one of the really, really big tricks in using the camera for this particular effect, was just using transparency, some smoke and mirrors, and then some depth of field inside the camera in order to make this sucker work and to pull that off. I went ahead and I set up an ambient light. So let's see here, inside my ambient light, the light options are pretty standard, just a straight ambient light. Then I have the spotlight, which is sitting up here and kind of pointing down. So when it comes into the guts right here, you get a little bit of shadow. If I was to turn the spotlight off, you can kind of see that everything kind of looks all the same color and tone, and that's fine. Maybe that's the look you're going for, but I just wanted to create a couple of, shadowy areas, and, I could have probably intensified this or brought this back a little bit and played with it a little bit more, but just for the sake of showing you guys, I didn't think it really mattered. So anyways, you could get really fine-tuned with that. And then one of the key things, after I set up all of the internal guts, I went ahead and created all of those like key teeth, that it's going through. And this was the easy part, guys. This was just a bunch of, let me go ahead and just set this to one view, active camera, and zoom back in here. Guys, this was just offsetting a bunch of those images, and if I click on it, I literally just used the wood panel and then, just kind of shadowed the bottom tip. That's what she said. And then basically just offset those in Z space and kind of move them up. So if I was to open up all of the settings right here, you basically just have the transparency. I hide the transparency, and then I open up that first one, and then as he's coming in, boom, my position basically goes from, what is it? We have the Y at 590, and then it ends at 404, just off screen and outside of the view of the camera. And then I just staggered a bunch of these, in Z space and did the same thing, so it kind of looks like it's passing through and those things are moving as the keys entering the mechanism. Again, then offset those other pieces in the back, set the positioning values to move once the camera got close. And then guys, it's just rotating the camera and moving through. All right, so the last piece of information that I think that you guys are going to want to take away from this is the actual transition. Like, how do I get to make sure that my footage isn't, moving, so there's too much distraction? And it's all about lining up your footage. So like in this particular case, when this one starts to rotate, you can see the girl's not moving right here. So you might want to fix that or blur it out a little bit more. But what I did is I created two pieces of footage. I duplicated my one layer, or actually I take that back. I went ahead and dragged my footage out on the canvas, and I freeze framed it at the position where it needs to basically transparency fade onto. So we have a freeze frame of the first frame of my footage right here. And then it's just holding, and I have a transparency fade on. All right, cool. So then once the camera rotates and kind of moves, I have basically the same duplicated footage that's not freeze framed on the bottom, and basically have it underneath that layer, so that my freeze frame layer just transparency fades into the actual footage underneath it. So if I go ahead and turn that back on, that freeze frame layer is now transparency fading out, and because it's on the first frame, you'll never notice that it's kind of even there, and it kind of just looks like that dreamy effect, right? And guys, that's basically it. That covers the entire key-lock transition and how I set it up in two-dimensional images. So if you guys want to kind of dig under this a little bit, I'm selling the project file for $10. Go ahead and feel free to dive into it and see what I did. And that should answer a lot of the questions that you have. I used a bunch of images, but how would you do it if you were actually wanting to do it on a piece of footage? So again, you could... So this was my method. I'm going to show you guys from start to finish really quick inside this file. So you'll see that I have the door, boom, straight into the image. So very similar to how we did the eye. If you watch the tutorial on the BenTK, Europe masterclass thing that I did, last week, then you'll know exactly how to set this up in order to make an image, you know, kind of tag onto that lock area. And then we're basically set up for putting the guts together. So just to hop in here really quick, just to show you guys, if you wanted a quick refresher on that, was I stabilized my footage first. That was the first thing to do, was to go ahead and lock in on that target area, stabilize my footage, render it out, bring it back in, so I have a stabilized footage right here. I always have an original layer of the original footage that I keep at the bottom just to preserve anything that jacks up if I was to do anything, so you really don't need that. But anyways, yeah, so we have our stabilized footage area, and then what I went ahead and did on the certain part that I feel like I was losing detail and my camera started getting a little whacked out was to freeze frame it. And then what I did was, again, I created a camera, and then I created a cam control because it's all being handled in Z-Space. I went ahead and started my motion in. Now, on the freeze frame area, this was basically it. This is my freeze frame, and then here's my lock ping. So I did the same technique that I told you guys that you should try, was to basically go outside and take a high-res image of my actual door lock, so that when I start pushing in, I preserve all those details. Look at how much more detail there is to work with. It's the image or the lock PNG, and if you look, what I did is I basically found that place where I wanted it to be. I masked it into position, and as soon as it was coming in, I basically set up some parameters, just a simple opacity fade on to that area, and then boom, my locking mechanism is now in play. And what you'll notice was on the original freeze frame layer, I had to create a mask and set the opacity because I needed my other lock to be on canvas, but that mask is basically creating the hole that I need, an inverted mask in matte for that freeze frame layer so I can travel through. Because you'll see underneath that freeze frame, there's nothing underneath it now, so I can start setting up all of the guts and the 3D cards in order to make it happen. So that's pretty much how you do that. So once your lock is in play, and then you'll notice I just feathered it really well, you know, and then brought the expansion back up on it. Here, if I was to set the masking parameters on this, so we have just the mask around the actual lock itself, and then I feathered that and brought the expansion down to like 76, so it kind of bleeds into the other image. And then again, I cut out the whole I cut out that whole area so that we can travel through that and the camera can move in. So now you guys can kind of see again some additional things that were taking place. I threw in some text, made it a 3D object and set it in the background just so you guys could see you know, where you would set up all the guts and, you know, all that stuff. And then the last thing that I did is I time remapped the entire transition. So it actually kind of zooms in a little bit and then kind of slows down. So I basically time remapped that on this layer and then set up curves that looks like that. So basically I pre-composed the damn door test footage layer and all of this stuff, you know, because if I was to play it back, it's just my gimbal slowly pushing in, slowly pushing in, slowly pushing in. And then we have the freeze frame. The camera picks up the work from here. And what I did, again, is I matched my camera movement to hold that gimbal motion and speed. So my camera picks up the freeze frame, so it looks like nothing's changing from here. So it looks like gimbal, freeze frame, camera picks it up, but still the same speed, because what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna handle the time remapping once I pre-compose all of this. So what I did is I grabbed all of this, right click, pre-compose, and then inside of this layer, I time remapped it and then set the speed to kind of move in really fast. And then once it gets to the door, it slows down, and then I would handle all the rest of the details inside of that composition right here as well. So anyways, guys, that pretty much sums it up. Oh, and then the last thing I did was add a little bit of force motion blur to kind of, again, sell it a little bit more. But
that should cover it. If you guys have any questions or any concerns, or you want to know anything else about it, again, I'm selling the project file, so take a look at that. It's really dirt cheap. It's $10. And then if you still have questions, hit me up and I'll answer anything you guys got.
So there you go, the Ben TK transition tutorial breakdown, whatever you want to call it. Guys, if you still have questions, go purchase that After Effects file. Dig under the hood, see what I did. It's got all of the camera settings, all of the camera movements, everything that you're gonna need to kind of really dissect how I put it together is in the file. It's only $10 and I spent 2 freaking days on it. So yeah, there you go. You're welcome. If you still have any questions, just drop me a comment or hit me up on Instagram. Again, guys, if you subscribe to this channel and hit me up on Instagram, 2 really great ways to help keep this channel going and letting me know that I've got some support here. So anyways, thank you guys again, and we'll see you next time.